everybody. I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Mike DeLisio.
I'm Chris Yee.
Today we're talking about The Hunt, where this guy is staring at what looks like you, but he's not. He's looking at a submarine. It is
Not a submarine. We were corrected on that a few times, and I felt very dumb.
Oh, he's a submarine. He's looking at ships.
Also not a submarine.
Help me out here. I'm feeling dumb.
Battleships.
Got it.
Yeah, the Admiral is a battleship. The Graf Spree or
Yes,
whatever.
the Admiral Graf Spree.
Yeah.
So he's looking at other ships.
Yes.
Okay, you know
He's
what?
looking at this cover because it's a great cover.
It is a good cover. One person in this game is in a submarine.
There's no submarine.
There's no submarines. Well, then how are they hiding? Is it just because the ocean's big?
Yes. Yeah.
You know what? This whole time I thought I was in a submarine. Well, you know what? I'm going to have to I'm going to let Chris show you how to play it since he knows more than I do.
Here's a setup for the game The Hunt. The Great Britain player, or the blue deck of cards here, is controlling these forces and trying to find the hidden German red player's ship here, the Admiral Graf Spree. The German player is trying to move this ship around hidden. They will keep track of their current location with a pad of paper and just track the location number based on the hex number. They'll be moving around and trying to appear out of nowhere to destroy these British transport ships. The way for the German player to win the game is to destroy 5 transports, and the way for the British player to win is for 5 of their transports to arrive at their destination. So every turn, this transport would move 1 step, and once it reaches this space here, it will go to the scoring side for the British player. First to 5 vessels sunk or delivered will win the game. And there's also an alternate battle that can happen, a final showdown, and I'll talk about that separately. At the start of the game, the German player will choose a location for both the Altmark, which is basically a supply ship that allow them to draw cards more easily, and they'll choose a hidden location for the Admiral Graf Spree. The British player has 2 random supply ships or transports out on the board, and then these are reserve forces which they can spend time to move forward and set onto the board. The game is driven by cards and by action points, like some other war games. You can either play a card for the number of action points shown on it, or play the card for the written event shown on the card itself. There's 3 different types of cards. Mandatory events will allow you to spend the action points, but also do what the event says. Hunt events take place during the main part of the game, which is called the hunt phase, and you would do whatever it says. If the card says remove from the game, you then have to place it in a separate special area removed from your deck as you can cycle through it. And then there are also battle events, which take place in that finale battle if it happens, rather than a player winning by transport sunk or delivered. So on a player's turn, they will choose one of these cards. If you spend it for the action points, you simply worry about the number and then place it into your discard pile. If you play it for the event, you carry that out. So let's talk about what the action points can be spent for. They are slightly different, though mostly similar. You'll notice that both players can move ships. So if you spend 4 action points, you can move a single ship 3 spaces, 2 for 2 or 1 for 1. If the German player is moving the Admiral Graf Spree, they simply notate it on their pad of paper wherever it has moved to, but they have to announce how many action points they are spending towards movement. They don't have to move the full number of spaces, but they have to announce how many action points they're spending. They can split those up between the Graf Spree and the Altmark. Both players have the same sailing. Both players can search, though it's slightly different. The German player, if they search, they reveal that the Graf Spree is hiding at a location where a transport ship is, and they will then go to roll the die on a search a value of 5 or higher, then they will successfully sink a ship. The German player also starts with the airplane readied. They can use the airplane to increase their roll by 2, so then a 3 or higher would hit. This blast is a 6, by the way. And so this would be a successful search. The British player would then reveal another transport from the bag to compensate for this at the start of the next turn. The German player can also spend action points to ready the airplane. It costs 1 action point as shown here. However, if they have cards that are in that removed from the game pile, and they do not roll higher than that amount, then the airplane will become permanently broken, or perhaps an event in their deck will be able to repair it, but only in that sense. The last thing that they can spend action points on is to store them up as extra fuel. They can store up to 2 action points for a future round. Now, the British player, like I said, plays very similarly. They have the same types of event cards, action points shown on the cards here, but they also can do a few different things. They can move. When they search, they have to have one of their naval forces in a space where they believe the Admiral Graf Spree to be hidden. They will search by rolling for a 5 or higher. I'm spending all my 6s on this demonstration, by the way. And if they are successful, then they discover the Admiral Graf Spree and they enter that battle phase. However, they can also do a few other things. They can spend action points to discard other cards from their hand in order to get these bonuses here. Binoculars will increase the amount of their search result so that it helps them get to the 5 easier. And then these tokens down here are clue tokens, so they could discard this card and spend an action point for the German player to have to place a clue token out, indicating that the Admiral Graf Spree is on that space or an adjacent hex. And then the strategy action here, the British player can spend 2 action points to advance one of their forces along this track, and once they come off the board, they now have additional forces, additional naval vessels that can move around and try to hunt down the Admiral Graf Spree. So that's the general basics of the game there. But let's also now talk about the battle phase. If at any point the British player is able to perform a search in an area and they roll a success, look at all those 6s I'm rolling, and it turns out that indeed the Admiral Graf Spree was there, the hunt phase of the game will end, and they'll move immediately to the battle phase. I should note at the end of a normal turn, players will draw back up. The German player at the end of their turn draws up to 3 cards unless they are in the same space or adjacent to the alt mark, in which case they draw up 5 cards, but that indicates to the British player a possible location where they're at. Now in this case here, as soon as the battle phase begins, players will draw back up cards into their hand until they have 5 cards in hand, both the British and the German player. They will then simultaneously reveal cards, and whoever has the higher number, the higher action point number, will cause the damage to the other player. So in this case, Britain takes the damage. Play then continues this way. We compare. And whoever is the first to initiate 5 damage to each other, or whoever at the end of those 5 cards does more damage to each other, will be the winner of the game. Whoever has less damage. Now there's one special thing that I should note in here, is that there are 2 important cards at play. One of them called Montevideo, and then the other is the Scuttling in Montevideo, in which case, if the German player plays a specific card, which is really good for them in the battle phase that reduces damage, and the British player plays this card, which states that they will automatically win the game. So that's the alternate win condition. Whoever has the least damage, whoever does the 5 transports, or if this combination of cards comes out, because that is a very good card that the German player may be holding on to, this is a very good card that the British player may be holding on to. And that is the hunt.
Now, the first thing I'll say about this game is I don't think you can judge it off of first play. I don't think you're going to play well your first time.
Absolutely not.
Right, and 2 people going head-to-head, both not playing well, is perhaps a funny experience.
Yeah, I think it's short enough that I think the best way to play it would be to play a game where each player is taking one of the sides. When you're done with that, switch sides and play again. Then you get to know both decks better, because a big part of this game is anticipating what the other player might do. And so if you don't know both decks, it's going to be a very exploratory game the first time or 2.
And I think a few things aren't super intuitive. I think battle itself is not particularly intuitive. I get it, but the game, the rules are like, well, do this, but if this card is played, and you're like, wait, what? There's alternate ways. But once you play it, it all makes sense.
It does make sense. So they feel a little disconnected to me in the sense that they're almost like 2 separate games that you're playing with the same deck of cards. But like you said, once you get it, it makes sense because you start thinking about keeping cards in your hand, specifically if you think that battle phase is going to happen. So,
and it really plays into what you're doing as the British player. You know, I might have the Submarine pinned the battleship, the Gravelcraft Spree, pinned down, and I know exactly where it is, and I have a good shot of being able to actually find it, but my hand is bad. Usually the British player has the advantage in terms of the action points, right, in terms of the numbers on that deck. But there are times when your hand might be terrible, and you go, carry on. But also I like the fact that you can spend points to discard other cards as the British player to boost your search, which also means if you have a bunch of 2s and 3s, you can ditch some of those if you have the points to get them out of hand, because then you draw up for the battle phase immediately.
The game feels a little bigger than the box, actually.
Yeah, I agree.
My biggest problem with this game, and I want to be clear, I like the game. My biggest problem with this game is the dice. And, which is weird because I love dice. But I like dice, I like rolling dice, and there's dice mitigation and things that you can do, right?
Yeah.
In most games. I feel like the die rolling in this game are pretty critical small amounts of dice being rolled. And that always worries me because you can just roll poorly.
You're rolling a d6. I mean that's really what it is. And the success is typically a 5 or higher. So you need to roll a 5 or a 6. You have a 1/3 chance of success at its base level, right? But as you mentioned, as the German player, you've got the plane, which is a pretty big thing. You have some cards that will help with that as well. And as the British player, you've got other ways to also mitigate those dice, as you said, discarding cards, things along those lines.
But you can still be really unlucky. You can still roll the 100%. You can still roll the 6s, and then I'm like, well, that's why I lost the game. That bothers me a bit. That keeps me from loving this more. Because, I don't know, I'm a big fan of dice. Oh, we roll lots of dice. Oh, I rolled poorly. But I'll roll better later on. I don't think the dice are rolled enough in this
I see what you're saying.
If you do 4 or 5 bad rolls in a row, which is not statistically improbable, it happens in games. You have streaks of that, you've lost. And it's not because of anything you've done.
Yeah, I suppose, but I guess the game length makes it bother me less, right? Because it's a 20-minute game.
And that's what keeps me from disliking it.
Right.
But it also keeps me from thinking it's amazing.
Okay. All right.
I can see it. That happened to me the last game that I played. I had the Admiral Graf Spree pinned down. I knew exactly where it was. I rolled a 2. Okay, well, next time I'm going to spend some of these cards to boost it. I rolled another 2.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't boost it enough.
Yeah, it was one of those games. This was a game between Chris and I, and as poorly as he was rolling is how well I was rolling. Like, I couldn't miss. And so I wiped him out. And you're right, it was primarily because of dice rolls. I don't think that he played the game poorly. I think that in that particular game, dice rolls pretty much decided it. So I give you credit on that. That's true.
I agree, right? And when I was filming the overview for this, I rolled like 8 6s. It was amazing. I was like, Mike!
Yeah, see?
But I agree. The luck is a little bit strong in this one, right? I appreciate that there is mitigation, and it's different on both sides. The German player has that push your luck element to it, with how many of those great action cards, event cards, they remove from the game, because it makes it harder to repair the plane.
Yeah.
But those cards are pivotal, and they're strong.
They really are, and I think, like you said, it's a push your luck, and it's a little bit of a red herring too, because I think all of those cards that if you play them for the event, when you remove them, they have very high action points.
Yes.
And so in that last game, I only played one of those cards as an event because it also relates to how you can recover your airplane. Your role is determined on how many cards you have removed from the game as a German player. And so I found that in that last game that it was better for me to use it as action points, because 4 or 5 action points could be huge.
Sure.
Yeah. And also I do think it's interesting how there's a hidden element, right, for the German player. There, you don't want to necessarily tip your hand too much to the British player on where you are, but sometimes you need to, right? And so it's a risk-reward type of a thing, and depending on how die rolls go, that may make a big difference.
It's a very smart design in a small amount of space. Like you said, it feels a little bit bigger than it looks, maybe. It doesn't feel huge, though. It's not giant game in small box for no reason.
Right.
I think the box is the right size. There's very few components, but what it does with those, it has a little bit of hidden movement. It has some asymmetry. It has some very nice card sequencing. That, to make an odd comparison, almost reminds me of Brass where you're sitting there, you have a limited hand of cards, and you say, this kind of determines my strategic path forward. Which of these cards am I willing to get rid of? You know, I have 2 cards that are both worth 3 action points. I only need 3, but oof, which of these do I get rid of knowing I'll not play that event, or it'll take a while to cycle through the deck to see that event again.
Right, and one thing to mention is some people I know have issues with reaction cards. Those are in this game, right? You have to be prepared. You might have a great card you're going to play, and the other player has a card that basically negates it.
It doesn't bother me, again, like I said, because in this game it's small. The decks are small.
It's small, right.
You can learn that, and like, oh, you could play a reaction card.
Right.
Is this when you're going to play it now?
Right, exactly.
So for me, I like the game. I like the asymmetrical nature of it. I think it's a really, you play very differently on both sides, and
Yes.
I'm a big fan of that. It's not like not like you have 2 different player powers. You're playing very different. Has a lot of cool components, although apparently the chits are so small I didn't notice they weren't subs. But I like the art in the game. I think the cards look good. The rules were well done, in my opinion. I just felt like the rules are not necessarily intuitive, but once you get them, you get them.
Yeah.
So other than the die thing I mentioned, I like the rest of it. I think it's a fine game. The dice keep it from me loving it. I'm giving it a 7. I enjoyed it.
Okay, this is a game that is part of kind of my awakening to maybe I don't mind war-type games, right? Because this is essentially a war-type game.
Sure.
You know, an odd comparison, maybe I'm completely off base, but when I was playing this, I was reminded of like Shores of Tripoli, right? Where you've got cards.
Oh, that I agree on.
Yeah, that you can play for events or you can play them for action point type of things. And I've found that I've really enjoyed those types of games.
You need to play Twilight Struggle.
Well, I've played it, but now the deck in Twilight Struggle is significantly larger, right?
But it's the same way you should memorize
Exactly.
it.
And that's my issue with it, because in this game, and even in Shores of Tripoli and other ones that kind of do this, the deck is small enough that I could legitimately know both of those decks very well, right?
And if not perfectly memorized, by feel.
I get a pretty good idea on, these are some of the things the British player can do. These are some of the things the German player can do. That's a sequel, The Hunt Part 2.
Red October.
Yeah, I almost said that. Okay, so I like it quite a bit. I also agree. I think it's a sharp little package, small box, bigger game. I think the art is fantastic on the cards. I absolutely adore the art on the cards. I'm giving it an 8. I really do like this game a lot. And again, it's kind of opening my mind up a little bit to maybe being more brave and to venturing into other areas in gaming that I've been hesitant
plays
to.
coin games next week.
Yeah, I tried that once.
I'm going to go on record here and say that there's a wargaming renaissance.
Oh, geez, here we go.
No, it's interesting. So I'm giving this one an 8. I really like it. I think that there is a little bit of a rejuvenation of like, wargaming is kind of cool. And I don't know if it's because some games like this are coming out that feel, at least to me, more accessible.
Yes.
They are.
Right? The smaller decks, the little bit of asymmetry, the hidden move, there's enough in here that's juicy and tasty, and I want to keep coming back to it. But at the same time, I don't mind that it could come down to the die rolls, right? Because I still feel like I've played well, and man, that was a good 15, 20 minutes.
And sometimes you miss your shot.
Right.
Yeah, and I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the multiple endings to this game are funny to teach.
Yeah.
But they all work well together. I don't know if I'll ever be good enough as the British player to apparently have 5 transports reach their destination. But at the same time, you have such an advantage, the British player, in the battle phase.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of balancing that seems to be there. The illustrations, the artwork by Albert Montes, he is becoming one of my favorite illustrators in the industry.
I agree.
Is he the one that did Grizzled? Or not Grizzled, but...
No.
Resist.
Resist. That's what I meant.
Resist
Sorry,
and the new Witchcraft. Yeah, I think he's a graphic novelist.
He's a graphic novel illustrator, yeah. He's fantastic. So I think that just the fact that a game comes out that looks like this, but plays like a neat little war game, I think that's great for the hobby. I think that more people are going to be interested in this. I know that, as well as Mike, I am also turning a corner and having more interest in this. This game's an 8. I think it's wonderful for that, with a few of those little flaws, but still a lot of fun.
Well, there you go, folks. That is The Hunt. I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Mike DeLisio.
I'm Chris Yee.
And I'm going to go eat a sub.
You sank my submarine.